Okay, so now we're going to talk about, this is chapter 27, and I'll make sure the correct outline is posted for y'all. So now we're going to talk about the militant side of the civil rights movement. So everything that we've talked about so far has been peaceful, but that's just not the reality. All protesters in the 1960s were not committed to nonviolence. They're getting a lot of violence from the white community, so some of them are frustrated from this violence from the white community and the police. So some of them are going to become frustrated with that struggle, and they're not going to think that the nonviolent approach is the best way to go anymore. They don't think that it's making any progress. So this is when we start to see the more militant organizations emerge that are going to clash with earlier organizations like Dr. King's. So first is the Watts riot in 1965, and this is several riots that start to break out across the nation due to police brutality, unemployment, rundown communities, and de facto segregation. So remember, de facto segregation is that segregation, it's just the way it is. It's not by law, but it's just the way it is. And that's still causing problems. So one of the most famous riots is in a community in Los Angeles called Watts. And the police pull over a young African-American man that they suspect of drunk driving, and a crowd of onlookers start taunting the officer. A second officer is called in, and he starts beating the crowd with his baton, and news of that police brutality starts spreading around the neighborhood. Remember, this is already like a contentious environment. They're already upset and discontent, so it sparks a massive riot around the neighborhood. These are photos of the riot. By the end, 34 people were killed, thousands are injured, and about $200 million in property was destroyed. This is one of the worst riots in American history. It escalated very quickly. So just like we have leaders in the nonviolent civil disobedient route of civil rights, we have leaders in the militant side of civil rights as well. One of these men is Malcolm X. He grows up as Malcolm Little in Lansing, Michigan, and his father was an outspoken Baptist minister and involved in civil rights activism in the early 20th century. Their house in Lansing was burned down in 1929, and his father is killed by the KKK in 1931. His mother is going to suffer a breakdown after this, and the children are split into several different foster homes. So he didn't have a very pleasant childhood. He was smart in school, and he graduated at the top of his class, and he wanted to be a lawyer. A teacher told him that was an unrealistic goal, so he lost interest in school and dropped out. He's going to move to Boston and have several different odd jobs, and then move to New York City, to the neighborhood of Harlem, where he's going to commit petty crimes. So he is going to be, first he's committing these petty crimes, then it's going to escalate. By 1942, he's coordinating various narcotics, prostitution, and gambling rings. So he is going to eventually be convicted on burglary charges in 1946 and sentenced to 10 years in prison. So sentenced to 10 years in prison, and he's going to use this time in prison to educate himself on law, and he's intrigued by a visit from his brother, who tells him about converting to the Muslim religion and joining a new group known as the Nation of Islam. So the Nation of Islam is not a new organization. It's been around since the 1930s. So this isn't like the religion of Islam, like in itself. Like that religion's been around much longer than the 1930s. Obviously, this is like as it's related to the civil rights movement. So they're going to come to the forefront of civil rights, the Nation of Islam. So it's going to follow the teachings of the founder and the supposed living prophet. So this is different than the religion of Islam. Just make sure that you know that. So they follow this supposed living prophet, Elijah Muhammad, and he speaks of armed violence against whites. So very counterintuitive to the nonviolence and the civil disobedience. He's preaching armed violence against whites. Members are known as the Black Muslims. Muhammad is going to teach that white society actively works to keep African Americans from empowering themselves and achieving success in any field. So political success, economic success, social success. The Nation of Islam is going to fight for a state of their own, separate completely from white people. So by the time he's paroled in 1952, Malcolm is a devoted follower of the Nation of Islam and takes the last name X. So he considered Malcolm Little, he considered Little to be a slave name and chose X to represent his lost tribal name. So he is kind of taking the polar opposite route of the non-violent side. He now wants to be separate from white people, but change the power dynamic completely to where whites are oppressed. So he's going to become, Malcolm X is going to become the spokesperson of the Nation of Islam and a media magnet because of how angry his speeches were. So we watched Dr. King's speech, and now I'm going to show y'all one of Malcolm X's speeches, and he is quite the attention grabber. He talks of black supremacy, violently eliminating white society, so just the flip opposite of the goals that Dr. King was trying to accomplish. Eventually, he is going to split with the Nation of Islam. So Malcolm X splits with the Nation of Islam, and he's going to find out that Elijah Muhammad was having relations with at least 6 women in the organization, and it's a teaching of the Nation of Islam to remain celibate until marriage, so he's not exactly following that rule. He was very upset by his leader's deception. So he's going to leave the organization and form his own organization, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. He then leaves on a pilgrimage to Mecca, the Muslim holy city, and he comes back a changed man, and he realizes the true Muslim religion, not the Nation of Islam as taught by Elijah Muhammad, but the true Muslim religion is going to call for equality of all races. So now, after this trip, he's willing to work with the white man and wanted equality instead of black supremacy. So he's going to change his ways. So really quick, that's Elijah Muhammad. So the assassination of Malcolm X. So now he's willing to work with the white man. He's reformed, split with the Nation of Islam, but relations between the two organizations are going to become very volatile. FBI agents working undercover with the Nation of Islam warned officials that Malcolm X is the target of the assassination. So he had been threatened, and his life had been in danger before, but they were unsuccessful. Car bombs, house bombs, nothing successful until February 21st, 1965. So he's giving a speech in Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom, and he's shot 15 times at close range by 3 members of the Nation of Islam, so the former organization that he belonged to. He was killed by 3 of those members, and they're later convicted of murder. And you can see those white circles on the backdrop. Those are the bullet holes. So that's the assassination of Malcolm X. And that's all.